Hey, BassGeek here, and unlike forward-facing sonar, this is banned in professional fishing, but it's not everywhere else, and let me show you why you should be throwing it. All right, geeks, that is right. I am telling you, this is one of my favorite baits to throw this time of year. I have had some incredible bags. I know guys who have made a lot of money fishing in different tournaments using this, and yeah, you know what we're talking about. It's the ARig, the Alabama rig, the umbrella rig, whatever you want to name it. The chandelier, I know I like to dance with it, and I'm about to show you everything you thought you knew and a lot of crap you never knew, and it's going to help you catch more fish. Let's go. All right, geeks, so we're going to talk about every single component, including and probably one of the most important parts, the swim bait. We're going to talk about color. You know, I don't go around throwing out master class, but an ARig is something that I have thrown for a long time, ever since it's come out. It's a staple in the area that I live. It's a staple for me. I throw it year round. My favorite time is this time of year, late winter, early spring. I think that's when it shines, here and in the fall. So let's jump right now right into the different types of ARigs that I like and the different actions that these ARigs have. Guys, there's a ton of different ARigs out there that you can choose from. I'll show you some of the ones that I've used. You know, this one you can't even get online, but I'm going to explain the difference. This is a DNC Custom Baits. If you want to look them up, holler at them, tell them BassGeek sent you. I'll be honest with you, I don't even know if they make them anymore. This is a softer wire, and that's the key that I'm going to talk to you about right now. So we're not going to talk about blades yet. We're not going to talk about baits yet. We're going to talk about wires, because if you're buying an ARig, and all of them are created equally, they do different things, and you can do different things with them. This is a prime example of what I'm talking about. Now, if I'm going to tell you to go out and you've never thrown an ARig before, this is the ARig I'm going to tell you to go buy. It's relatively cheap. There's a ton of them out there, and they come in a ton of different styles. And what I mean by that is, here's one with small blades. This is the Umbrella Junior. They make a umbrella which has bigger baits or bigger blades on it. Then they've got this umbrella, which is no blades at all. So a little more finesse style, a little clear water, you can get away with it. But the one thing I want to show you about these is that that wire is a little stiffer. It's not real hard, of course, but it is a little stiffer. This is kind of a stiffer wire ARig. Now this is by Shane's Baits, and this has a little softer wire to it, a lot more spring in this wire. Still a good solid wire. You're not going to break it off or anything, you know, after a fish or two, but this is a little softer wire, so it's going to have a little more action than, say, a stiffer wire bait. There's reasons for this. So let's talk about when you're going to want a stiffer wire bait. For me, a stiffer wire bait is one that I'm going to want when I'm around largemouth a lot of the time. They're not going to want a lot of really unusual action, extra action. They're really going to inspect the bait. And so a stiffer wire bait is one for me when I'm around those largemouth. I'm going to use it there when I'm targeting them, or when I know I'm around bigger than usual bass, so that they're not bending it up, tearing it all to pieces, or I'm using heavier weights like this. You know, we were fishing this down vertically at about 80 feet. This is the Big Daddies. This is a stiffer wire ARig. It's a smaller ARig, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But heavier weight and largemouth is when I want a little bit stiffer, a little bit less action. Cold water too. Cold water, I don't want a whole lot of action. So those are three considerations you need to have. Another stiffer wire again is the Umbrella Flash Mob and Flash Mob Junior. This is another one that I'm going to use. You know, like I said, this is a good middle of the road. It's not super stiff, so it's going to have a little bit of action as the water's warming. Like I said, this is one of my go-to baits right here, but a little stiffer. So when you give it a quick reel turn, it's not going to compress and come apart. You can throw heavier weights on this and still get a little bit of action, Lighter weights isn't going to move it nearly as much. Now this is the money ball. This is by Shane's Baits. It's one of my favorite A-rigs to use. And what's really great about these A-rigs is that you can actually unscrew this head and put new arms on if you have an arm that breaks. So the main A-rig is pretty durable, but the wire itself is a little softer. So you're really going to get, when you give it that action, that quick turn, you're really going to get a compression of the baits, and then they're going to spread back out. And that's an action that can get a lot of bites for you, especially around smallmouth, spotted bass. Largemouth, when they're super active, like when they're just super aggressive, this little bait can really, or a lighter wire bait of any kind, can really get a bite when maybe some of the other ones can't, just because of the amount of action. This isn't a bait that I'm going to use in ultra cold water, and it's not a bait that I'm going to use a whole lot. Maybe the Shane's Baits, because even if I do break an arm, I can put a new one on. But when you're using lighter wire baits, you're going to get a ton of action. So it's something that I'm probably not going to use with really heavy heads either. Blades. Blades are going to be something that I reach for 90% of the time. This is one of my go-tos. This is just an all-around good condition style. Kind of got the smaller finesse blades on it. It's a good all-around rig. So when am I going to use blades? If it's A-rig conditions, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, most of the time this is the bait that I'm going to reach for. Something that's got good finesse blades on it, something that's a little stiffer wire, and I can throw a lot of different sizes. And remember, wind is your friend. Think of an A-rig as a big spinner bait. Something that you're going to also remember when it comes to weights is that the more blades, the more lift. So sometimes if you're going to get it deeper, you're going to have to counteract that with the heavier weights. So if you go with the umbrella that's got the bigger blades, you're going to get more lift. It's not going to get and stay down as easily as the Flash Mob Junior. So in other words, if it's 5 foot visibility or less, no wind or very little wind and cloud cover, then I'm probably going to throw this. A little bit of wind almost all the time. Now, if we're talking 2 foot or less, no wind, bluebird sky, I'll throw one of these. Now let's talk about when we're going to throw an A-rig with no blades. So no blades, listen, rarely am I going to throw an A-rig with 5 foot visibility, no wind, and a bluebird sky. Just ain't going to do it unless they're deep. Now, if they're really, really deep, yes, and I'll probably go with this, something that's much more subtle. The blades aren't going to matter when they're down that deep, except for maybe a little bit of vibration coming through the water. But if I'm in open water, I don't want them to get a look at it quicker than they have to. I want them to make a reaction to it and see it as late as possible. And that's again where this comes in. So no blades, I gotta have a little bit of wind. It can be a bluebird sky, it can be, 5, even 10 foot visibility or more with wind, and I'll get away with throwing this, especially this time of year. That 45-degree water temp all the way up to about 55, 60, even into 65-degree water temps. I'm gonna throw this bad boy. Let's talk about heads. Let's talk about weights. Let's talk about how I put them on here. These are Eclipse heads from Angler Tungsten. Now, the only reason I've got these on here is because we were fishing deep. These heads are not cheap. They're tungsten. They've got eyeballs on them. They're incredible swim bait, incredible minnow bait head. It's all I had to get this bait down 60, 70 feet that we were fishing. I would not recommend putting quality heads on an A-rig. Quality hooks are one thing, but I would just go with lead. And the reason why is because, especially if you're throwing these over brush or laydowns, you're gonna lose some of these. We'll talk about that too in just a minute. There's a couple of good brands out there that sell some good, and I don't want to call them cheap, but affordable heads. Bumpkin swim bait heads, and they've got mustad hooks in them. They sell them extremely well priced, and you're going to get 4 or 5. I think it's 5 in a pack. An 1/8 ounce is kind of my go-to weight. DNC, I showed you these earlier. They don't sell them online. Big Daddy's makes a swim bait head that's really affordable you can put out there. Now, when we talk about heads, that's kind of another argument that we're going to make. Do you have a fine wire or do you have a heavy wire? For me, most of the time, If I'm fishing around smallmouth or spotted bass, I want that fine wire hook. So a fine wire, you don't have to haul off and just knock the piss out of them. You can lean into them and keep reeling. A lot of times that's when you're going to catch 2 and 3, not swinging away. When you swing away, a lot of times you're going to hit that one bass, and that's going to be the bass that you catch, because when you pull it away like that, a lot of times those bass know something just happened. But if you can just lean into them with those fine wires, a lot of times that's when the other bass are going to continue chasing and try and grab those other shad. A heavier hook, when I know I'm around bigger than usual bass, the heavy hooks are where I'm going. So let's talk about colors. Geeks, I keep colors pretty daggone simple. Largemouth, smallmouth seem to love this, and this is kind of a play, a little bit different color on the electric blue chartreuse. Electric blue chartreuse is probably one of my go-tos for smallmouth, and largemouth love it. But this is sour grape. Smallmouth hate this color. This is from Ramsey Baits, and it's a great little color. White, I mean, any kind of sight flash, any kind of pearl or white, it's hard to go wrong there. A lot of guys throwing white around, so that tends to be one of the reasons why I go a little bit different. But that's pretty much it. Like, if you've got a color that you feel confident in, you know, pick it up, tie it on there, and give it a whirl, see if they'll eat it. But for the most part, those are the 3 colors that I throw 99% of the time. Okay, geeks, so let's talk about rod, reel, line, and really I use 2 different combinations. Now, I will say this is my Resolve by TFO. It's a 7.4. I've got a 7.6 at the house that will handle a little more weight, so I will probably switch this out. But it is a 7.6 heavy. I think it's a fast action. This is a 7.4 heavy fast action. Now, I do like this rod for doing what I'm doing. This is for my lighter ARigs, and the reason why is because when I'm fishing stuff like that over there, I can be a little more accurate in placement with a shorter rod, but I do like longer rods in general. So generally, I'm not going to throw it on a 7-foot. It's going to be a 7.4, 7.6, and I'll show you how big the other one is. This is the Lew's BB1 Speed Spool. They don't make this version anymore. I will put a reel that will work for this. I've got 1/8 ounce hooks all the way around, and of course, this is K9 Pro 100, and I'm throwing it on 15-pound test right now. Don't be afraid to throw it on 15. I would recommend throwing it on K9's Fluoro, which is kind of like a co-poly, so it's got a little more stretch to it, especially if you're first learning. 20-pound test, because these things are heavy. We'll talk about casting in places where I want to fish them, but let me show you my heavy rod. Now, this is the Tactical Elite. They don't make these anymore, unfortunately. There might be a few out there. They do make a rod that you can use in place of this. This is an 8-foot mag heavy, 1 to 5 ounce. It's great swim bait rod, big swim bait rod too. And again, another reel that you can't buy anymore with the Lew's. But on this one, I do use 20-pound Pro 100 fluorocarbon by K9. Again, I will highly recommend, if you're new to throwing an ARig, you want a little bit of stretch, pick up K9's Fluoro, which is super clear, super strong, but does have a little bit of stretch. It's like a copolymer. So great for these horizontal baits. Unfortunately, I fish a lot of ultra clear water, so I throw their Pro 100. Let's go show you how to cast these, where to fish them at. So the water's pretty dirty right now. Like, it's really perfect. This is a clear water reservoir, and the water's pretty dirty, about 3 feet visibility. We've got some wind blowing in. Now it's partly cloudy, so the sun is coming and going, but this is really what you want. The water temps are rising. The only negative is that the water is dropping, so it's pulling them back off the bank. But that's still a perfect time for an ARig. You know, you can hear the wind blowing in. One of my favorite places to throw it is a channel swing. Now, I do things a little bit differently. I'm not going to get in tight on these. I'm going to make a long cast to them. I'm going to 45 them to 90 them. I want to bring it right down that rock wall. So let me show you what I do. So I'm gonna make that cast. When I make that cast right up to the shallow, I'm going to slow roll it. Now, I will say this is a 6.3. During the wintertime, sometimes I like a 6.5. You have to decide what type of reel you like, because slow is the key when the water temps are like they are today, around 45 degrees. 55 or less, you want it slow, you want it hugging and snugging that bottom. And what I mean by what type of reeler are you like, I generally tend to be a faster, natural pace. So it's harder for me to slow down, so I'll go towards slower reels when I need to be slow. Some of you guys might be a naturally slow and would rather go with a, faster reel. It's just what your kind of natural rhythm is. You got to kind of offset it, but you want to reel this slow. So you're going to stay at about a 45 to 90, throw this thing up there, long cast, nice and slow, reel it in. As I'm reeling it back, I will give it a quick twitch of the reel handle, or I will give it just a little tap of the rod, quick half turn, just to get that bait ball to pulse, or I will give it maybe just a tap on the reel tip too, to get it to pulse those baits. It looks really natural, and a lot of times that's when you're going to get your bite. Now, as far as the hook set goes, that Carolina rig hook set, you're going to swing to the side, and you're going to keep that rod tip low. Like I said earlier, this is not a bait you want to try and reach down when they're flinging around a bunch of hooks and get a finger in the mouth. So get it up, hop them in, get them in the boat. One of the other places I like to fish this is points and humps this time of year. And we got a point right here. One of the things that I like to do is fish both sides inside, and I'm going to fish all the way out, and then I'm going to get out and point the boat in and come right down the spine of that point. So inside turns, outside turn, spine is how I'm going to fish that point with this thing. And as far as, the reel, it's going to be the same exact thing, real slow, contouring the bank, and a couple of little twitches here and there. The hook set and everything else is going to be the same through all three of these. All right, geeks, so the other place that I love to throw an ARig this time of year is around laydowns. This is where the bass love to come when they're resting. It's where the big bass are, and this is where you're going to catch the biggest bass on an ARig. Again, treat it just like a spinner bait. You're going to throw it right around those trees. Again, you don't want to tickle, but you can hear the wind, and it is your friend right now. So what you're going to do is you're going to make a cast out there and just immediately start working that bait back. Nice and slow. Contour that tree every once in a while. Stop it. Give it a little half turn. Bring it back to you. Hook set and everything's going to be the exact same, so no need to show you that again. But the ARig this time of year is a killer bait. All right, geeks, so that is it on an ARig. That's pretty in-depth for me. I know some of it is just going to be trial and error for you. We didn't go into like what weights I use all the time for what depths, but it'll really change depending on the bait, the retrieve, the blades. There's so many aspects of it that's going to change based on where, how, and what you're fishing it with and on and for. So, but hopefully that'll give you a little bit of a starting point. And for you guys that are a little further into the ARigs, something even more to think about and tweak to catch more bass with it. All right, as always, questions, comments in the comments section below. You geeks know I love to talk about fishing. Like it if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. Make sure you ring that bell. 100% Watch Squad, baby. You guys make the geek world go round. And as always, you geeks rock.